Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. If you go ahead and take your seats, or if you'd like to participate, come on up. We'd like to be able to see you. If you would be so kind as to put your phones on stun or silent, that would be greatly appreciated. Well, good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. Please take your seats. This meeting will be broadcast live and archived, and we are ready to start. Good afternoon. At this time, I'd like to call today's meeting of the Texas Racing Commission's Rule Review Committee to order. The time is 4:02 p.m. Welcome to the second meeting of the Racing Commission's Comprehensive Rules Review. I'm Dr. Connie McNabb, Vice Chair of the Texas Racing Commission and Chair of the Commission's Rules Review Committee. I'm pleased to be joined by Amy Cook, our Executive Director, and we hope that Commissioner Waite will be able to join us as soon as possible. When he does come, two commissioners still do not represent a quorum, so we will not be functioning at that level. We are present today to begin the task of reviewing our current rules as well as those best practices in the industry to update and modernize the Texas rules of racing. All our rules will fully comply with the Texas Racing Act and the Texas Government Code. The goal is to simplify the Texas rules of racing so they give clear direction to regulators, racing participants, and the public. The process will include the opportunity to update the agency procedures through the work group process and the recommended approval of updated policies and procedures, improving the integrity of racing, the agency's responsiveness to the industry, and become fully transparent and accountable. We are here in historic Fredericksburg this evening to listen to the concerns and comments of the Gillespie County Fair and Festivals Association. It is critical to have the feedback from our oldest continuously operating charity racetrack organization, since they bring a great perspective. Over the next 18 months, this committee will hold additional meetings throughout the state in the communities that thrive and contribute to horse racing. As you see in the roadmap provided, the goal is to write a whole new rule book. In the end, with extensive public input, we will propose a new, modern Texas Rules of Racing to take effect for the 2024 racing season. Today, we are pleased to begin with the new Chapter 302, which is posted on our website. It will focus on rulemaking authority, definitions, and responsibilities for the Commission, the Executive Director, the agency responsibilities, and the Comptroller responsibilities. And Commissioner Waite has not yet arrived? Great. Well, thank you for coming, and we will start with invited testimony. We'll move on to agenda item 2, invited testimony from Sally Briggs. Ms. Briggs? Okay, Ms. Briggs has sub-designated Lee DeLong. Sir, if you please come up here, and we have a location that you can stand so we can pick you up on camera.
Don't be shy.
Join us.
Welcome, sir.
Thank you, Commissioner. Glad to be here this afternoon. I'm glad to see everybody here in Fredericksburg, that y'all could make it out. And thank you for trying to think of the word, acknowledging the historical side that Gillespie offers.
Yep.
We had a tremendous meet this year. We'd like to thank the commission. Amy, thank you very much for everything that you've helped us do, and it was great. Man, I really wasn't prepared to have to get up here and do that.
It's okay.
I got thrown under the bus.
It makes your comments genuine.
Just to talk about your perspective on, because, I think I've told you everything's on the table. How the agency functions, how we should relook at that, how the rules of racing operate, and you have great experience in your group of what went well and didn't go well. So even if you just want to take a minute and talk about maybe, over the last 9 months since I've been here, are there things that are better that we should sustain? Are there things that you want us to leave behind? Just maybe a few things like that would be great.
Amy, it's everything ran so smooth this year. I know as far as from our perspective of how racing went, it was such a breath of fresh air that everybody from Gillespie had a renewed sense of why we've done this. We've been doing this since 1881, but we've been doing this since the parimutuel started. And we've had some really rough years that we didn't know if we were going to be able to continue. With lack of a better term, maybe some over-regulation that we felt, and this year we've had a renewed sense, and are looking forward to many more years.
So I think what I really want to make sure you know and everyone knows as we rewrite the rules is it's important to me to put in place procedural safeguards. So there can't be over-regulation, so there isn't any one position at the agency level that can sort of take a path different from the path set by the commission that sets the rules of racing. The agency staff policies carry out the rules of racing. It's the commissioner's job to set those rules. And really making sure when you look at the agency responsibility and some of the things that didn't go well, as you think about that, continue to communicate how we can get that right, because I'm just the one that has the position for right now, but I would really like to leave a legacy where the agency functions really well, and then there's not this opportunity for it to go so poorly again.
Yes.
And have so many concerns. So absolutely, great.
Our biggest thing is the historical side of it. And I would say that the only concern that probably the association has is our historical days. We've run the same days from 1990. Every year we get the deal. Can you put your days in for 2 years from now? I can tell you, 10 years from now, we're going to have the same days.
Okay.
So, I do think that, I think we already have your dates for the next 5 years. And so I've told all of the other tracks that my position on it is no one will be scheduled at the same time as you. I even think now I understand even better that if someone is scheduled right up to when you race, that also impacts your race card. So I think it's important to work through that. And I understand that and appreciate it. But I also think that there may be differences between it, whether it's a statutory change or whether it's a rule change. A charity racetrack, is treated in terms of the cost that is you were required to bear, different from maybe the Class 1 or Class 2 tracks. So I think that what your group thinks about that is really important to help us get that right, because your scholarship program and what you do for the community is quite a different business model than a Class 1 track that's making money, as a typical LLC or business.
Yes, ma'am.
I think one of the key pieces trying to put this together, and I've got some historic perspective with a big gap in the middle, but what the Racing Commission and the rules all look like some time ago and then now. And there's a lot of redundancy because I think people have just tried to add into the rules on an ad hoc basis to put out fires. What we're looking to do, and this is where you've got great perspective because you do have this continuity. We'd like to have the rules be very clear, small words, short sentences, so people know what is it that I have to do, what is the standard, and then the things that really are staff procedures we put into procedure manuals. Those are going to still have full public input and visibility, so there's nothing that's secret from the public, but we'd like to make the rule book so it is much more clear cut for you. So if there are areas, because you said you said that there have been times that the over-regulation actually threatened the meet. What are some of those areas where we need to go in and have that extra, our antennas up? Let's make sure that we make this clear and concise and useful.
And as far as that, I don't know per which rule.
Well, just categories, topics.
I'd say category for us. A big thing is other tracks running on top of us.
Yeah.
That hurts our pool of horses. It hurts our jockeys. There's a small pool that we pull from anyway, and when there's more than one track running on the same day within 70 miles of each other, with Retama is the example. That's very hard for us and them.
What do you think about, so in some of the other parts of the rules, there are certain things that say this applies unless all of the tracks agree, or this applies unless all of the tracks agree. I mean, do you think that your particular set of race days should be something like that, or do you think that the charity racetrack should really kind of be considered independently? Because it is, I guess potentially there could be other charity racetracks, although we only have one right now. Do you think you should be treated, I guess, in the same way in terms of there needs to be a corporate agreement that includes the charity racetrack as well, or those racetracks? Or do you think that's sort of a separate?
I would think that would probably be an independent
Yeah.
thing to be done.
Okay.
And running on to, obviously, same day, it would be very difficult. Even if it was afternoon racing here and evening racing
ma'am.
there, that would be very difficult. But if it's just a day separation, or does it need to be more?
Well, I think, I'm going to answer that a little bit for Lee. I think with when Rotama was running their first meet weekend, they had a reduction in their race card, even though it wasn't the same day. It was the 4th of July weekend.
And actually on the Saturdays, they actually did run on the same day.
Right, there was one Saturday, and this is the other thing on scheduling race dates. The commission staff, I don't think, at the commission agency, really looked to see was there appropriate staffing, because we had 3 stewards racing literally between San Antonio and here to cover both meets that weekend, which we should never do that again, because everybody was running tired, and we're fortunate we didn't have an accident or anything. So we don't want to do that.
Concern with jockeys.
Not only do we not want to do that to the tracks, we don't want to do it to the horses, the jockeys, or the agency, because we're not doing a good job ourselves if we're doing that to ourselves.
Okay.
Yeah.
And a question that I have, talking about whether it is day of or day before.
Yeah.
It's what is the definition of a racing opportunity? Because if horses are running at one track on Thursday or Friday, even though we may not run on top of at the same, and we run Saturday and Sunday, that's still only one racing opportunity. It's 4 race days, but that's only one racing opportunity for a horse.
Right. Right.
When things run that close together.
Well, and it's a great point, because what is a race day? I mean, I'll be honest, when I got this job, I thought it was like a Thursday, right? And when there's 3 tracks running, there's actually 3 racing opportunities, and that's in one race day. So I think that's a definition that we didn't really sort out, and we could in the rules. So.
Well, and not just the availability, horses and jockeys, but we've touched on it, but I think it bears even more on the safety aspect, because we have a small group. We have people who are independent business people, trainers, handlers, veterinarians, jockeys, you name it. And if they are working 18-hour days and throwing horses into a trailer to go as fast as they can to get to the next thing because it was just poor planning, that's when we start having train wrecks that none of us need. And I don't want to see a jockey being sleep deprived and getting into a situation on the racetrack where his reflexes just aren't sharp, and then we have a tragedy. So I think
and another problem that we run into with them that close is on our race card we'll have races, and all of a sudden there's a horse doesn't get to run because we don't have any jockeys left to ride them by 4 o'clock in the afternoon, because they had to leave to go to make it to the next track.
Right.
So
I'm really glad we're talking about this.
And it's 110 degrees and they're tired, and then they're going and starting their card there, and they're trying to maintain their weight so they're not hydrating.
yes.
No, that's great, Lee.
Okay, I think we've got some safety issues that we need to address for the good of everyone. Is there anything else?
This Mike Sockerville.
We can accommodate you, sir. Okay. Lee, is there any other area, because I think this is something we need to take a look at, and I understand on these big weekends, that's money in the bank. Those are the days that the betting public has off, and they're looking for opportunities to go, but we also want to make sure that we're not sacrificing humans and horses.
Yes, ma'am. And look, I guess from our perspective, I hope I'm speaking for the rest of the association, our perspective is those are historical days. Like I said, we have run those days since 1990.
Right.
And if you ask us tomorrow to send our days in for 2030, they're going to be the same 8 days.
Right.
They have not changed, and I don't see them.
And I don't know that you ever had a problem getting those days. You've had a problem with others being scheduled over you.
Yes, ma'am.
Yeah. So
And-
I think everybody, I can't believe anybody would object to us really looking at articulating that in language. So what's coming next, the next chapter 304 that we're trying to write next is the business and occupational licensing, which covers race days and race opportunities and all the rest of those things. So we're going to be working on that language next. As we come out of this meeting, Virginia's going to start burning the midnight oil on that one. That's really an important chapter in terms of distinguishing charity organizations from, business organizations, I think, and really getting some of that right. So just keep thinking about it and either send myself or an email or, anybody from your association can send a note, or they can also go in through the website and just put comment right there because it's set up a way to do that on the page. So it's really important. And when we get those drafts out, which we'll try to get them out well before the November 9th meeting, send us feedback and tell us whether that makes sense to you. And of course, we got a lot of time. We'll
Yes.
have those drafts out there, and then we can go back and go, wait a minute, this definition needs to be fixed, which is why we're taking the time to do it right. But really important to have your group's input on that.
But,
And we appreciate the opportunity.
well, and just across the board, our job is to protect the health and welfare of the racing animals and the participants, and I think that we're skating on thin ice and,
Yes.
knock on wood, but, God expects us to do our job.
Yes.
Okay.
Thanks, Lee.
Well, thank you, sir.
Mike?
Sir?
My question was for Lee and for
And-
y'all. I don't know
Introduce him.
anymore. I know that when we first started racing back in the 90s and we were running head-to-head to Rotama and some
This
of
is
the...
Mr. Bill, Mike Saugabill with the association.
Okay.
No, that's okay. It's all good. It's all good. We're just trying to make sure we
Yeah.
got that.
If a horse was wanted to enter here, they had to pull their papers out, and instead of being inserted back in, they got punished by putting their papers to the bottom of the stack. And so if we're running are they still doing that? If we're running a 350, for example, and a horse is in Retama and they have a stack of papers or whatever, and for 350s, and they're pulling papers for their races, to run that horse here, they've got to get their papers out to bring them up here. And so when they bring them out, Retama would say, if you pull them out, you can't run here till maybe 3 or 4 weeks later. So they were being punished for coming down here.
Okay.
I don't know if
Yeah,
they're still doing
I
that.
can't.
And it was just.
I haven't
a
heard any
thought that-
examples.
Yeah.
I haven't heard any examples of that
I
for
mean,
a long time.
Yeah, that's something we'd have to ask trainers.
Well, and I think that the way you avoid any of those kind of practices, which I don't believe the current management of Rotama would engage in that, is to just not have them on the same date at all. Just kind of the weekends that you have it, ask Rotama to just try to schedule, differently. In between when you're racing or however we do that. So I will commit to you that I'll call Angela tomorrow and just have a conversation with her about how her application's come along, because I don't have it yet, and how she can avoid having any kind of conflicts there with your schedule. Because it's not a secret that you have had the same dates for
Yeah,
Yes.
forever.
Yes,
forever.
Yeah,
Right.
okay.
Okay.
Good. No, appreciate it, sir.
Thank you very much. We do appreciate
Thanks,
it.
Lee.
Thank you for your help.
Mr. Tracy next.
Okay, and Mr. Bill Tracy? Welcome, sir.
Thank you. My name is Bill Tracy. I'm the manager of Eureka Thoroughbred Farm here in Fredericksburg.
Welcome.
And I've spoken to Amy several times about racing in Texas, and I had a few things that I think need to be looked at as far as rules and clarification. One is claiming horses, that we all know what the status is of the horse when he goes to the test barn. The whip rule is a big thing right now, all across the country. There was an incident just the other day in California where the rider hit the horse, I think it was 5 times over the limit that they allow, and that cost him his win and a $48,000 purse to the owner.
Right?
He came from way dead last and won in a photo finish. So if I were the owner, I'd want them to encourage the horse as much as it could to get to that horse. So I don't know that 6 strikes over a period of a mile and an eighth race is an adequate number.
Can we, so let me ask you a question, because this is going to be, on that particular rule, as you know, the HISA jurisdiction
Right.
doesn't apply here, but if we were to have a crop rule, should we even have one, and what would you think it would say? I mean, the HISA rules have a type of crop, you know, which of course was delayed because there was a supply chain issue. Then they have a number of strikes, but me being a horse racing novice, admittedly, my understanding is it's really important to allow the jockey to have discretion. That doesn't mean that we don't have, you know, the parameters here in our state where if you're using the crop on a horse before you are actually, you know, out of the gate, you know, in an appropriate way as judged by the stewards, that you're not going to get called on that.
Right.
But having a specific number of strikes seems to be problematic for everyone. What do you think about that?
I think that if you're a rider and you're riding in a race and you're trying to steer through traffic and you hit the horse on the shoulder with a stick just because you moved your hands over, that shouldn't be counted as a strike. Certainly an overhand back to the horse's rump, that would constitute a hit. But if you're just poking at him with the stick, that helps to encourage the horse, and it also helps to steer.
Well, it keeps the jockey safe too,
Yes,
right? I mean,
exactly.
having watched a few jockeys now
Yep.
go either their interference or they're coming off the horse because the horse has been interfered with. So right now, what I think what I've told our steward group and even the investigators and the veterinarians is I really want when we do the rewrite to empower them to do what they need to do to deal with the violations and use their discretion. But we don't want to have overregulation. We don't want to have overreach in that regard. So to me, I do think that sometimes when your rules get too specific, that's why we're talking about having procedure manuals, then you can really hold people back from being safe in a way.
Yes.
because you're being overly restrictive. So
Right.
we don't want to be that at all.
You're trying to remember how many times you hit a horse and you're trying
Well,
to
they have to watch a video is my
Yes.
theory. I mean, I don't,
Exactly.
so I'm sorry, I can't, I mean, even an inexperienced eye can't count the number of strikes when
Right.
there's, 10 horses running together.
And with a rider, if he's raising welts on the horse, that's different than encouraging.
Right.
You know, so if the horse comes back and he's got stripes on his side and blood running down, that's too much.
That's excessive
Right.
use.
Yes,
Yeah.
exactly.
And can we go back to what you said about the claiming rule? Can you expand on that a little more?
Just, it's so diverse all over the country. But when you claim a horse, at what point is that claim voided?
Mm-hmm.
You know, you go in there and you put your claim in. Certainly, if he drops dead on the racetrack, nobody wants that one.
Right.
So, it's just a tough situation. So, looking through the various claiming rules, again, around the country, it needs to be a little more, I don't know if standardized is the right word, but to where you know going in. Now, I know that some places you can sign a waiver on the claim card saying that no matter what happens, you're going to own it. Now, again, if they go into the test barn and the vet there says he's lame or that he bled, he's on the vet's list for 30 days. And that's probably just the way it ought to be. But as far as a horse being, or a claim being voided, again, for a drug overage or whatever, that all needs to be kind of laid out the way.
Do you want
We've,
to address that? 'Cause
yeah.
we talked about that in our hair
Yeah.
testing meeting
Okay.
at Retama.
I came up from the old school that you claim and
That's it.
there it is. But I'm moving I'm moving off that the part of the claiming piece where to me, if indeed the horse dies on the track or breaks down on the track, or even if the horse for the hour from the time it comes into the test barn for an hour, and in that hour as that horse cools down and,
Right.
and pulls up lame, being able to revoke the claim at that part, that makes a lot of sense to
Yes.
me.
Yes.
The part where waiting for drug tests to come through and then splits that happen, because I'm an old veterinarian and I've practiced on the track. If that horse goes to a new owner, but they don't really know if they're going to keep it or not, is that horse really getting the care that he needs? Or if the horse is going to go back, I mean, it was not every time, but it was not uncommon that I would have one of my trainers claim a horse, and as soon as the horse was 2-3 days post race, first thing we do, we geld him.
Yeah.
Well, if they're getting him back, you've got, it's a different game. So,
Parts missing.
yeah, there's parts missing. But indeed, what is if there are questions, is that horse really going to get the care, or I don't know what the status is on that horse, so they're far into the barn or they're someplace else, and my heart is with the horse. I would say we are leaning very strongly toward the, we're in the old days, as soon as the horse came out of the paddock, he set one foot on the track. If he didn't even make it to the test barn, the new one would have it. In this day and age, that is probably antiquated. We're working on that. But I'm trying to find what is the right thing for the horse and what is the fair thing for the industry. And right now, I'm leaning towards looking at what's happening in other states and watching a lot of the press, because as rules are being inflicted elsewhere in the country, some that are really strict and others that aren't, the gray area seems to start about an hour after the horse has been in the test barn.
Mm-hmm.
If you don't say, no, I want to give this horse back, then it's yours. So we're not. Nothing is in stone, and I'm still trying to really understand. But I think that we can bring some common sense to it.
Good.
But it all gets down to whoever owns the horse needs to have full responsibility and care for that animal to the best of their
Mhm.
ability. And
Yes,
that's what I'm worried about when it gets too long.
Okay. One other item is zero tolerance on drug testing.
Okay.
Is it black and white? Is it zero tolerance, or can 2 picograms of something help a horse to win a race? I just don't know if that's the case. I think individual testing, looking, again, applying common sense to
Right. I mean, there are some medications that I'm all over zero tolerance. I mean, how much fentanyl is a horse allowed to have?
Oh, exactly.
Zero.
Yeah.
How much cocaine is a horse allowed to have? Zero. But we try to be as common sense as we can, but still, if we this is where stacking on the NSAIDs came in, is you get people who are always pushing the envelope, and number one, back to the health and welfare of their horses
Mm-hmm.
start to get worn out. So we try to be as common sense as we can, but there are times that you have, it's just like raising kids. There are times you have to say, look, you didn't make your bed and you didn't do the dishes, so you're not going out Saturday night and
Yep.
you can't have the car. So we try to be as reasonable as we can. But if indeed we are completely over one direction on something that, is an unforeseen circumstance. I mean, I'm aware, there was a case, and this is a long time ago, but a horse tested positive and came up even positive on the GC mass spec for a highly prohibited substance. And it turns out this trainer, this is a one-horse trainer, had bought some hay that had been cheap because it was harvested from the edge of the field, and they were able to prove that there was a specific weed in that hay with that compound, and it went through the whole thing, and they got off, and that trainer was restored, and she and her one horse went back to running. But
Right.
that one was so far the exception to the rule. So we do the best we can, but if indeed there are truly extenuating circumstances, we welcome people to bring things forward. But that doesn't mean a guarantee that it's going to go away. But make your case. We don't want to be without some perspective.
I think the good news is that chapter's coming up where we're going to be addressing drug testing, safety of horses. Should be 306, I think, where we're talking about safety of horses and greyhounds. And so with the HISA anti-doping medication program coming, which is like a big secret, right? Due in January,
Yeah.
daylight's burning.
Yeah.
But there should be a lot of conversation. I mean, we obviously in our state don't really think the Lasix ban is appropriate. And we have other things. Now we have just republished, or I republished under my signature with minor changes just on where the splits go, the split and the primary go to the lab and some of that, the prohibited substances, the penalty guidelines. But that is all absolutely, and it's on the publications page under the procedures. So we'll start doing these procedures under these rules. If you pull that down and you see anything about there, Mr. Tracy, that you question, I don't think the word zero tolerance really appears anywhere, but we do say that there are certain things that should be no evidence, in the horse. But I don't know that we have, because I think a lot of the things that I've inherited, I think I either don't know where they came from, or they may have been borrowed or copied from another best practice or another state. So as everything's on the table, so if you see the way we've articulated something, whether it's racing opportunity or whether it's how we talk about drug testing, to really be as fair and equitable as possible while also protecting, the sport, then I want to know that, because terms do matter, and that's why shorter terms, the rules of racing not being this tome. I mean, we took out a term, exempted. Equity investor or something like that was in the last rules and definitions. And Steve Ross, who's the parimutuel guy at Retama, who seems to be the one that knows more about parimutuel other than maybe Scott Sherwood, who's sitting right over there. Nobody knew what that definition meant, so it came out, right? Because there are things that are in there that no longer fit what we want to do today and what we want our state to be. So if we're not saying it right, if we're not thinking about it right, this is why we're here, and I'm so grateful that you came to talk with us about your feelings and thoughts.
If I can offer one comment, the one thing that I'm seeing a trend in the industry, at the industry national level or even international, there are valid therapeutic agents out there that if they are used on the specific horse, secondary to a very specific evaluation and diagnosis and appropriate dosage, are exceedingly valuable and the medication for that animal to have a functional, productive, useful life. However, whether it becomes urban legend or people just say, well, if it's good for one, then it's good for the whole barn, and if a teaspoon's good, then a cup is better, then you wind up losing the ability to use highly effective, appropriate medications on the individual horses, because when they are used far in excess and across the board in horses that don't need them, then there are cases where they become fatal, because there is no medicine that is not a poison. It's all a matter of dose. And so if the industry will be a little bit more judicious, then we aren't going to lose so many things that are valuable medications. But when something becomes so heinous and kills enough horses, it just gets to be, we have to sacrifice the few that just will never return, because we're not allowed to use what we want to.
Thank you very much.
Well, thank you, sir. We appreciate it.
Okay.
Thank you, Mr. Tracy.
Thank you.
Appreciate it very much.
Okay. Do we have more?
We do.
Oh, yay, good. Okay, Mr. Azzopardi. Welcome, Tommy.
For the record, my name is Tommy Azzopardi, and today I'm here representing Gulf Coast Racing, Laredo Downs, and Valle de los Tesoros. I just wanted to make some general comments, not specific to any one rule, but on the process. We are very grateful that this process is being undertaken, and we recognize that it's not without sacrifice from the staff and the number of hours that y'all are going to have to put into this. The commissioners, such as yourself, Commissioner McNabb.
Chairman
traveling.
Pate said that he would double my pay.
Well, that's awesome. That's
Go
great.
from zero to...
The double zero, yeah. It's no secret that my client, on behalf of those 3 licenses, joined with Lone Star Park and have filed a lawsuit because we're concerned about how HISA is being implemented. We don't think it's constitutional, and we think there's a better way to do it. As a proud Texan and somebody that's been involved in horse racing for generations, my family goes back quite a ways, I think Texas can do it better. And I appreciate the fact that y'all are willing to undertake this task. And I am confident that with enough diligence, Texas will set the model for what the nation should look like. I'm all about uniform medication. Unfortunately, HISA has already demonstrated that they don't have uniform medication. And without going into the details y'all already know, I'm convinced that the model rules way is the best way to go, and I think we can set the model for the nation. And so I appreciate y'all taking this time, and I appreciate everybody that shows up to these public hearings. And hopefully everyone will take it serious, and hopefully everyone will give meaningful input to this process. Because, it's the old, garbage in, garbage out. Well, I'm convinced that if we put the right input into this process, we'll have a great result on the back end of it.
We do appreciate what you and your group have done, and which of you had the sword that drew the line in the sand, because, you know, in Texas tradition, that seems to be how we deal with the feds, but we do appreciate the hard work that has gone into where we are now. We certainly understand that there is a sacrifice from the horsemen, because our non-compliance with HISA is a costly proposition for the industry, and we do not underestimate the dent in the process that is, but we must follow statute. But we also hope that the horsemen can see that when they come here, they know what to expect from us. You know, that we're going to be fair, we're going to deal with them, here are the rules of the game. It's not going to be I got a secret, do something totally unexpected, but we do understand that there's a sacrifice. But we like you, we want to see this right, and I would say that our commitment to the health and welfare of the racing animals and the betting public and all the participants in racing is no less than anyone at Jockey Club or HISA or any place else. We are as committed as anyone, but we have to do it right, and we're not seeing that coming out from the feds. I think that you're absolutely right, that Texas can do it well. We can even set the standard, but we do understand that right now there's some sacrifice till we get out to the other side, and hopefully we'll have a good outcome, and yay Texas.
I agree, and you know, I hope through this process and through the process of the litigation, horsemen recognize that this was a genuine undertaking that we took. This isn't just, I had a conversation with a congressman last Friday, and the question that he asked was, is this truly a problem, or is this just Texas being Texas wanting to fight Washington? And I assure you, this is not Texas just being Texans. This is a situation where we recognize, as the chairman has pointed out, that there is an absolute conflict between the federal and the state statutes. And it's not a situation where federal law just automatically trumps state law. There's an absolute gap here where the federal legislation doesn't even address pari-mutuel wagering.
Right.
And the only way Texas can conduct pari-mutuel wagering is with the oversight of the Racing Commission. So we're hopeful that this litigation will show to everybody that we have legitimate concerns. We're not just picking a fight, that this is something everyone should be focused on. And I'm convinced that even if the lawsuit is successful and HISA is remanded back to Congress to fix it or to completely change it, something will come forward. And we do need higher integrity, and we do need higher safety standards, and we do need uniform medication.
Yeah.
And I'm convinced that this is the best way to do it, is to get severe public input from stakeholders on the best way to conduct racing. So I appreciate it.
We appreciate it.
Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Okay. No?
That's it.
Okay. All right. Discussion on specific rule requests for the Texas Rules of Racing. We'll move to agenda item 3A, chapter 303, subsection 303.92, thoroughbred rules. The specific rule amendment, which is part of the meeting materials, was requested by Mary Rule with the Texas Thoroughbred Association on unclaimed ATB awards. Mary, would you like to present this item to the group? Can we have you over here?
Virginia told me to sit here.
Oh, she did? Well, please.
Wherever Virginia tells you to
Please.
sit, you have to sit.
We all do, because Virginia's our trusted general counsel, and she's always right.
All right. Thank you so much. This is more of a housekeeping item. It's certainly not anything of any urgency, but some things have changed over the years. Right now, our Rule 30392 says, if a share of the breakage cannot be distributed to the person who's entitled to a share, the breed registry shall retain that share. I would like to change the wording, instead of saying a share of the breakage, to say any accredited Texas Bred Incentive Funds awards. And that's because back when this was written, the Texas Bred Incentive Awards were primarily funded by the breakage and a percentage of multiple wagers. And now with the inclusion of HIEA funds, it's my opinion that it's more accurate to use that recommended language. It goes on to say, thereafter, a notice of the entitlement shall be published in the Texas Thoroughbred magazine for the first 3 issues. We no longer have a printed magazine, either online or actual print. So I would like to see that changed to published on the TTA website for the first 3 months of the second calendar year after accrual of the entitlement. If the entitlement is not claimed before August 31st following such publication, the funds shall be transferred to the Breed Registry's general account. If the person entitled to the share thereafter makes a claim in a form acceptable to the Breed Registry shall pay such person the amount of the share. I would recommend changing from shall to may, just for a couple of reasons. Typically, if we cannot pay someone an award, it's because we cannot locate them. They may not be a licensed person, particularly if they are the breeder of the horse. They never owned a racehorse or raced a horse, so they're not licensed. If we cannot locate the person, we obviously cannot get the proper documentation to pay the award. And the way that this works is in January of 23, we're going to publish the unclaimed awards from calendar year 2021. So that's basically anywhere from 12 to 20 months after the award was earned. And we feel like that is a sufficient time, once that publication is out there, to allow them to come forth and submit whatever documentation is necessary by that August date. We don't have a problem with it going a bit longer, but since the way that it's written is the unclaimed funds go to the Texas Thoroughbred Association general account, if for some reason we had another COVID-19 disaster, it's possible that those funds might not be there. They might have been used at that time to sustain the operation of the association. So I hope I've explained that properly, and I'd be happy to answer any specific questions.
So you're concerned about unclaimed awards from ATB and the notification of the folks who were supposed to get them.
Yes, ma'am.
I wonder if the commission could maybe, the agency could maybe help you, because you're talking about maybe publishing it on a website, but do you think that has a broad enough reach to be able to find the people that, is there any other way I think that we could facilitate maybe that communication?
That would certainly be appreciated if it could be published on the commission website as well. Again, the commission is very helpful as a resource when we're looking to find an owner. You've been very helpful with getting us contact information for that person, but in the case of a breeder, it's nearly impossible to find them.
Okay, and this is what's good is we made the ATB and accredited Texas bred and HIA horse industry escrow account their own chapter, because those rules are, I'm just going to say it, painful to understand, and I think that we've got to do a lot of rewrites in there. Is this something that you think you need before we complete the revision of the rules to be able to deal with the money that you have on hand? That's why you'd like to go ahead and...
Not necessarily.
Or is it something that can be added into the newly revised chapter? Should be 308? 310.
Okay. Yeah, the only
It's on
thing
the
I'm
roadmap.
concerned about is the publication of...
Yeah, but if
those
there's something we
unclaimed
can do to
awards.
publish now, you can certainly follow up with myself and Phil.
Okay.
And we can see how we can maybe assist with that.
Okay.
Because I do think that we're trying to continue to expand not just the use of the website and our other channels, but we have a Texas.gov open data portal presence. They were getting ready to try to update and use that for more things as well.
Okay.
It seems to me, it kind of strikes me, your recommendation, like when you see it in the paper where the Texas Secretary of State says, hey,
Right.
here's all the unclaimed money. If it's yours, come get it.
Yeah.
It seems like the agency should help you with that because it is a Texas program. We do get the funds and we do pay them out to you. So
That'd be
we should
great.
help with that, I think.
Okay, perfect.
Yeah, no, that's great, Mary. Thank you.
All right.
Well,
Any
thank
other questions?
Any other input? Okay.
If not,
Mary, thank you so much.
Thank you.
We appreciate it.
This is Mary's comment card, so we're good there.
All right. Okay, the ATB and HIEA provisions contained in Chapter 303 will be moved to the new Chapter 310 on wagering and trust administration for future rules review meeting. We will now move to Agenda Item 3B, discussion of the new Title 16 Texas Administrative Code, Chapter 302, which is to include in part the current Chapters 301 and 303. Virginia, would you please present this item to the group?
I'm going to join you, ladies.
Okay?
Okay.
My voice carries, Commissioner McNabb, so you may not need a mic.
Humor is always appreciated, Miss Virginia Fields, General Counsel.
My
Texas
voice
Racing
carries.
Commission.
My voice carries. Okay, thank you, Madam Chair, Amy. Thank you, everybody, for coming today to discuss the new Chapter 302. And thank you to Sally Briggs and the Race Barn for hosting us today. We really appreciate it. I'm going to refer everybody, there's handouts on the table over here, along with our roadmap on our rules, okay? But it's beginning on page 4 is our new Chapter 302. This document basically represents the staff's combination of chapters 301 and 303 in our current rules. As part of this rules overhaul, the roadmap and staff's goal is to reduce the redundancies, outdated portions, or any unnecessary rules. Therefore, the draft before you today is part of this proposed Chapter 302 and is again a consolidation of Chapters 301 and 303. The next working draft that we'll be working on at a public meeting at Lone Star Park will be for a new proposed Chapter 304 that will combine Chapters 309, the racetrack applications, and Chapter 311, the occupational licensees. We'll begin with item 3B. It has 4 subchapters marked A through D. There is in the draft also a subchapter E entitled Procurements. This is not on the agenda today, as the current plan may be to move this to an agency administration chapter separate from the rules of racing or in our contract management guide, which will be a policy procedure handout that the agency will employ. I'll go through each subchapter, A through D. I'll pause after each subchapter and give the floor an opportunity to make any comments as we go through this, because it's a little bit long. This working document was also the result of an internal agency rules review we conducted on September 7th. As part of our rules review, I've included today ARCI model definitions that people may want to suggest be included in our definitions portion of subchapter B. But understand that we're also looking at these HISA rules as we go along and whether any of them might be complementary to a uniform application of the rules and ease any transition should that happen. We'll begin on page 4 of subchapter A. It's entitled Authority. This chapter basically denotes the Commission's enabling authority. It's from the Racing Act and the Texas Government Code that's to engage in the rulemaking process in and of itself. It's kind of the beginning of the beginning, and it's Rule 302.1. At this point, it's kind of self-explanatory. The Government Code requires some rulemaking agencies to make rules specific, i.e. to procurement, licensing rules, and the Racing Act as well requires that we make certain rules with regard to licensing and drug enforcement. So if anybody would like to make a comment with regard to 302.1, we'll open the floor now for the first part on page 4.
Do you want to come up? Nick wants to come up. Then we can touch on camera. Here you go.
Welcome, sir.
Amen.
Nick James, representing today the Texas Greyhound Association. We've noticed, obviously, that in 302.1.2, I guess, that Greyhound is taken out of the rules. And obviously, the TGA would prefer that not happen. We know that Greyhound racing is probably not going to be back in Texas, but we still have 2 tracks, one Gulf Coast, one in the valley. And the TGA would rather that the commission continue to oversee as it always has, rather than taking us out, taking the TGA, the Greyhounds out of the rules.
So I'll take responsibility for that. We had some definitions that had horse and greyhound, some that were just horse, some are just greyhound.
Okay.
And so there is in the health and safety chapter, horse and greyhound.
Yes.
So what we decided to do with the draft is, and this is the struggle we're having, is agency. What is the agency? So let me back up. Commission versus agency, not straightened out. That's its own problem, which
Yeah.
we're trying to address in this
And,
part, which
yeah.
may end up becoming its own, like what is a commissioner? How do you get to become a commissioner? How does that work? What does the agency do? Because in our statute, it says the commission will write this division of responsibility between the agency and the commissioners. Never been written,
Oh, okay.
which is part of the problem. So there's that problem. Separate from that, there's what is the state of greyhound racing and being respectful of that? And then how do you organize the rules effectively?
Okay.
And so really what we started trying to do here but didn't do it perfectly is potentially these are just basic racing definitions, and then in horse there are definitions that are like what's a maiden? What is a maiden is in our rules about 15 times. Just like, you know, you're either, what is a quarter horse maiden, what is a thoroughbred maiden, or what is a maiden, okay? And so this is the internal lively discussion that we had on where does it all land and how do you simplify? So the call that I made on this draft, which we're open to change, is that when it's specific to horses or specific to greyhound, it's in those sub-chapters, and this is rules of racing overall definitions.
Well,
And-
that's my fault. I misunderstood.
No, it's all good. It's all good because we just decided this last week and we were trying to figure out where does everything land. Because you can literally have, there were like 15 maiden definitions and we went through and just tried to make this make more sense. So that was my call on the draft.
That's fine.
And-
We just obviously saw it.
We care about you. You're still in our statute. You're still in our mission. You're important.
And at this stage of the game, I think it's fair to say that greyhound racing has hit an inflection point, would be
Well, that's very.
a large
Yeah,
word.
an inflection point, yes.
But we're not the coroners,
No.
nor are we the ICU. We are the regulators.
I
So
understand.
we are looking for, we understand that there are still components of the public that we serve that are involved and still connected to what we call greyhound racing. So we also look to you. Is there something there? What are the things that we need to do? Because our job is to make sure that indeed the Racing Act is implemented. We're fair to the public. We try to be regulators. We don't create it. We don't run it.
But the strategy behind leaving it all open is if you get to this chapter and you go, oh crap, that doesn't work. Not that we would say oh crap on film. Oh darn, that doesn't work. Then you go back and go, let me fix the definitions thing and fix that back. So it's all open. That's why we do one repeal and replace at the end. What I would like to do is sit down with the Greyhound folks and go through Virginia and I, the Greyhound chapter.
Absolutely.
And have that conversation and talk about, what is the modernization of that chapter, and do you want to pull some of that up to the front or not? Because I'm struggling not with horse or greyhound. I'm struggling with defining what the agency does independent of the commission and putting in those procedural safeguards I keep talking about. Like, for example, I think the executive director should have a performance evaluation. Call me crazy. I think
be arranged.
the commission chair should give a performance evaluation to document the performance of the executive director. Not written down anywhere. I just think that. So, but does it go in the rules as a procedure? I don't know. But this is the kinds of things that I think are important to rethink all of it. So I'm really glad you said that.
But as the greyhound industry is going through some major changes, we need to better understand, as opposed to whatever residue has been in our rule book and been tweaked for 20 years.
Sure.
We need to understand what is the industry and that's going on, and what is the appropriate role for us as regulators, accountable to the governor and answering to the legislature. Are we doing what is expected of us for your industry while it's in this unusual situation?
Sure. We understand. And we appreciate y'all going through this because it's not easy.
Well, after Virginia put maiden, ARCI maiden, HISA maiden, other best practices maiden, let me just say, we were like, okay,
We got it.
let's start putting this into buckets.
Okay.
So and there's not a maiden greyhound, but boy, there sure could be one.
There is a maiden greyhound.
Oh, there's there?
But
Is
no,
that- Well, yeah, a greyhound that's never won a
I
race.
have to go back and look again.
Yeah, but anyway,
But I appreciate y'all going through and cleaning this up, because there's somebody who looks at these.
it takes quite a bit of coffee and chocolate just to get the definitions sorted out. So.
Well, and if I can interject though, Nick, we took all the definitions out, like you noticed, kennel,
Yeah.
and this
Yeah.
kind of gets into subchapter B and the
Okay.
definitions, but We took those out with the idea that we would have a Greyhound chapter with definitions, with the licensing issues, and all of those issues that are relative to Greyhound racing. So that when somebody picks up a copy of these rules, they'll be able to go, okay, look, I want to look into the Greyhound. I want to look into entry. I want to look into the racing judges and this and that. They can go specifically to a chapter, as opposed to, you know, it was 315 where the Greyhound rules and then we had definitions and yes.
Oh, yeah,
So that's kind of
we
where we're
appreciate y'all doing this. I don't need
Hey, if it was easy, everybody would do it. That's right.
Well, we're not done calling you that.
Right? No, appreciate it. Thanks.
Okay,
Nick.
Thank you, sir.
Okay.
Okay, so that was basically it's the enabling authority. There'll be other probably meat added to the bone on enabling authority as we go through these rules. Those laws that enables the commission to make rules. That's what our subchapter A is about. The next section, which Nick somewhat alluded to, and you'll notice through the definitions in this working copy, are the definitions. Chapter 301 of our current rules contains nothing but definitions. And so we went through all of those definitions, got rid of the outdated, the unnecessary. Some were recited in the Racing Act. They didn't need to be in the rules. So they were removed. In looking at kind of a general overview, and the definitions go from page 4 through page 9, many of the definitions were just simply removed. Some relate to Greyhound, which will go into its own chapter. Some were redundant and from the Act, unnecessary, like active license and active racetrack licenses defined in the Racing Act. Staff also amended some of the definitions. You'll notice false start has been redefined. Paddock has been redefined. The prior definition didn't include, it said an area the horses gather before a race. Paddock was changed to be an enclosure where the saddling occurs before a race, right? So it's just to make these things a little more clear. And again, we removed the Greyhound references with the hope that we would have a chapter related specifically to Greyhound definitions, licensing, rules of racing. Staff also added some new definitions, and we'll recommend anyone come across. We took actually the definition of concussion from HISA. Definitions such as bled, nomination, nominator, and simulcast. Simulcast was brought in from ARCI. ARCI has 2 simulcast definitions. I got a call from somebody at Sam Houston today saying use the ARCI. Well, I used one of them, I didn't use the other one. So I'm going to get with them and see, you know, where that was. And as well, it was based on Steve Ross with Ratama, if he's out there, also helped me with the simulcast definition. I'd like to open the floor now for any public comments relative to definitions. Today we included some of the ARCI definitions on the table over here. For any recommendations or public comment on rules or definitions that you would like to see included, clarified, or even removed. Mary Rule.
Yes.
Oh, come on, Tracy.
Tracy Sheffield, our president. Questions on some of the definitions. For instance, number 8, ATV horse accredited by the TQHA as a Texas bred quarter horse. If I'm not mistaken, there is somewhere in the rules that there's a thoroughbred accredited Texas bred. And I believe it basically says a horse accredited by the Texas Thoroughbred Association according to our rules. But this particular number 8 only speaks to TQHA, not the other 3 registries.
You had your own, and for some reason we were going to do that. I don't know.
I think we removed it, but I do believe that the thought was it was in the Racing Act, and I'll have to go back. I'm making note of that.
Okay.
But the definitions
I got the
in
statute
the
right here.
Racing Act 2021 had some of those accredited definitions.
Okay.
But it was taken out of these rules, and we may need to put it back, but the thought was.
I did the comparison with Phil on the Racing Act, and so part of the problem we have is it looked like someone, when they made some of the rules, cut and pasted the statute right into the rules. So if it's already in the statute, and I want to say that you're right, Virginia, that accredited Texas bred was defined in our statute.
Was she saying thoroughbred though?
Right, but I think that might have been in there. But I remember you had both.
Right, my question is, to me, it's confusing. If you're gonna have definitions separate from the act, then everything needs to be, whether it's already stated in the act or not.
Or have a footnote to reference back to the act.
That it's in the Texas Racing Act. That's a great
Right.
point.
Right.
Yeah, that,
Just
because
cross-reference it.
there's a bunch of things. So my thing is between the act and the rules. So there are some definitions we have that are never mentioned again.
Right.
And so we're trying to level that out at the same time. But no, that's a great point that we
Right, and
footnoted if it's in the
that
act.
also takes place in, 83. You've got a definition for TQHA, but not for the other three registries. It may be the same issue there.
I think it's an editing problem.
No, that's TQHA, and I thought we had AQHA at the very
we had
beginning.
we had TTA.
Yeah, number 5 is AQHA.
Right.
The-
But you
the
have
TTA.
TQHA back on
Oh,
83,
TTA.
Thoroughbred.
Oh.
and we don't have the other three registries.
I think
We'll
that's-
fix that.
I think it's an editing problem because here's my question
Thank
to you now that you're standing up here, and since I see someone that's very from the TQHA. So in the rules that we had before, an accredited horse was a horse that was accredited by the Thoroughbred or the Quarter Horse Association in Texas, and it also had to be accredited by the Jockey Club,
It has to be registered with the jockey.
registered, and that was
Or in their,
that was a
in their case,
definition.
AQHA.
So I removed that from the definition.
Okay.
Because my position on it, check me out on this, is if your organization say that horse is good, I'm not adding in the jockey club requirement. Even though you would require it, it wouldn't necessarily be the commission. If you say this is an accredited Texas bred from your organization, then we would take that, in terms of how our statute and rules would read. Because I think there may be a time, this is Amy Cook's opinion purely, where there are HISA states and non-HISA states.
Okay.
And if we get to that point, then it's potential that the Texas organizations would be the ones that would accredit the racehorses that race here. And it wouldn't necessarily have to rely on another state or that organization to do that.
Okay.
And that's just Amy's opinion. And so, but I do remember, because I read through this, and I think it may be an editing problem, that we had how we described you and what you do in terms of accredited Texas bred and how you basically bless off that this is an accredited thoroughbred in Texas for both of you. So I think it might have been an editing problem, or it may have been that we struck it because it was also in the statute.
Okay,
So we'll
but you
fix
got
that.
that in your notes.
Yes,
Great
I've got it in
catch.
my notes.
This is why we're doing this. Thank you.
Thank you.
If you look at 14,
Yep.
I don't think that is exactly accurate according to the Jockey Club. You say the mare is considered to have been bred by a stallion if the physical act of breeding has occurred, and mare is listed on the stallion's report of mare's bred filed with the Jockey Club for a particular breeding season. Your sentence goes on to say, and is not subsequently bred during that breeding season to a stallion not accredited by the breed registry. That's not correct. It just needs to end there.
After season? After season and delete, and is not subsequently bred during the breeding
Yes.
season to a stallion not accredited.
Yes, because if the mare doesn't get in foal with the first breeding, she may be bred to a different stallion later in the breeding season.
Right.
But she's still going to appear in that report of mare's bred for the first stallion.
Okay.
So, help me understand this, because this is one that
Chief Commissioner McNabb provided assistance with this draft.
yeah, I'm sorry, I'm guilty. If a mare is covered by a stallion, then other offspring of that mare can then be part of the program? Or only get of the accredited stallion get
Right.
to
And
that?
where this would come into play is if we have a mare that is pregnant with a foal
Right,
sired by a Kentucky stallion.
Right.
She comes into Texas.
right,
In order to receive the full breeder's award amount on that Texas born foal, the mare must be bred back to an accredited Texas stallion after foaling.
right,
So she's bred to Little Chunky, who's an accredited Texas stallion. She's going to appear on his report of mare's bred. She doesn't get in foal.
right.
Later, she's bred to another stallion that's not accredited Texas bred. That's fine. For our purposes, she appears on the report of mare's bred for the accredited Texas stallion that qualifies for full amount of breeder awards. And that's why this is
The
important.
other foals from other stallions
Right.
can qualify.
Right, but it's not unusual for a mare to be bred multiple times during a season.
I know.
Typically, it's to the same stallion, but it might not be.
It can change.
But, I mean, here was just my point on this is, somebody says, hey, this is a good deal to have these foals that are not from Texas stallions. If we take this mare over here, she gets covered by that stallion. I mean, it's not too hard to get, the mare's enough in heat that she'll stand for the cover, but there's no way she's gonna get in foal, but you just wanna get on his list.
You might know more about that.
catch
than
my
I
drift?
will, but I don't think that's.
I mean, if there's economic advantage just to the mare being covered by a Texas stallion, and you really don't want her to get pregnant, you know, she just has to be in heat enough to not kill him.
Well, the thing is, those stallion fees are quite substantial. I don't know if it'd be worthwhile when you're talking about that difference in breeder money. It's not a lot.
It's not enough, and that's a lot of effort to go
Oh, no.
to go to.
I know. I mean, I've been in the business, but I mean, it just struck me on, you know, I just want to make sure, because I mean, y'all are the ones. That's where the rubber meets the road. Is to who's out there trying to reach into that pot with what horses, and as long as you're satisfied, okay. It's just, I mean, like I said, it's just if somebody's just saying, if all I have to do to get these babies into that program where the money is arrange this Saturday night date, you know, with this mare and this stallion.
Well, we also had a situation this past breeding season. One of the farms in Texas that stands several really good accredited Texas stallions had a case of strangles.
Right.
So many breeders were not able to breed to those stallions even if they'd already booked them.
Right.
Because they couldn't go on site.
Right.
And in that case, that person needs to find another stallion if they want to continue with the cycle.
Right.
And so that's where you can
Okay.
get into that. I think if people sign up to breed to a Texas bred stallion, they've made a conscious choice to do that. Not saying, I'm just going to put this down, but I really want to breed to
Okay.
the stallion.
I mean, y'all are the ones on the important end of this. As long as you're satisfied that there's not untoward things going on. You know, we're just
Yeah,
trying to be
yeah.
reasonable regulators and.
That situation is more common, I think,
Right.
than somebody trying to game the system by hauling a mare from farm to farm,
Right.
stallion to stallion.
Okay, I mean, as long as, like I said, you all are the ones that are subject to it, and we just want to try to be fair regulators.
Right. And then I had a question on 16.
I just want to tell you that it's not in the act, nor were you in the definitions before.
Okay. Well, there we go.
Do they
We'll add that right back.
You
That's
do
why we're here.
exist, but you're not, you weren't, so this goes back to, we had definitions that were never mentioned again, and then we have some things that are not defined, you know, like racing opportunity maybe is the one we would want to add, but, yeah, that's why I was just looking at the current rules. So, I'm not going to commit Virginia to a timeline, but we are going to publish another draft. But if there's specific things beyond our conversation that you want to make sure we know and we add into the next draft, let us know, and then we'll be posting
Okay.
and publishing in the next draft. So, I'm sorry, go ahead, the next one.
Should we touch on 15,
Um,
just adding state in front of breed
Yes.
registry on 15?
Yeah.
In front of, in between official state breed?
No, just right now it says breed registry, and really the
State
Texas
breed.
Thoroughbred Association is a state breed registry, and that clarifies.
Okay, the official state breed. So it'd be in between official and breed, right?
Yeah.
Official state breed registry.
and then, of course, the other breeds are not mentioned there.
Oh, yeah, we missed the
Yeah.
paints and
Yeah.
Arabians. Yep. And this is
I'm
why we're
adding
doing
that,
this.
Toba, et cetera.
Yeah.
Okay. On number 16, we have breeder, and again, this is speaking specifically to a breed. A person who is, at time of conception, the owner of record of an ATV brood mare that follows an ATV horse. Not in thoroughbreds.
Yeah.
The breeder is listed as the owner of the mare at time of follow-up.
Yeah, we took that right from 303, so we just need to
Right,
fix
so,
it.
Yeah.
the ARCI rule definition is really good.
Okay.
Means the owner of the horse's stand at time of felon for thoroughbreds, for quarter horses, after races, ratings, and paints. The breeder is the owner of the dam at the time of service.
Okay. And that ARCI's is under breeder too?
Yes.
Okay.
Right.
Thank you.
Great.
Very helpful.
For this page, I think
That's all I have.
yeah,
That's a lot, yeah. And we talked about 83.
83? Yeah.
Where the TQ ratio is defined, but not the other three.
TTA, yeah, we'll put that back in.
Toba and the paints. Got that narrated.
Okay,
Yes, ma'am.
valuable, very valuable, thank you.
I do have one more question.
Sure, absolutely.
This is on 302, 201 commission meetings.
Yep,
The old language required 6 meetings per year. Is that something that was left out intentionally?
I think
It's in the
that's
statute.
Statute, yeah.
Gotcha.
That one's in the statute.
Okay.
So if it's in the Racing Act, we're just trying to remove some of that. I think if you go through and look through the rules, 8505 Cross Park Drive, the old address for the agency is in these rules like 5 or 6 times.
Yeah.
And if you get into the Racing Act, it says that, the commission will establish a headquarters in Austin and offices at all the tracks. So we allowed the statute
So
to prevail on
If you have
those.
feedback on the statute, since legislative session's coming, send that as well.
Please.
Because Phil is,
He's hiding.
He's back there.
he's the one that's tracking the statutory changes in partnership with Virginia. He's trying to get the rules right. And I'm the one going, wait a minute, it can't be in 2 places. Where does it really belong? And so there are some things potentially that are ruled that maybe do belong in statute, or vice versa. So all of that, think about it all.
Okay.
Where should it really be?
I do think as a marker, though, just to avoid it on some of these breed registry and defining out, these types of a Texas credit bred mares and so forth, that stallions, that we probably should focus on keeping that within the rules, because those rules really work on the administration of the horse industry escrow account and the ATB
Yeah.
distribution. So probably best here.
Good. That's it. That's all I know. Thank you.
Great.
Okay.
Thank you, ladies.
you.
And just because I can, so you all know, and this is the hazard of having a veterinarian as commissioner. I did expand on bleeders. It breaks my heart to think that we have to wait until a horse is physically bleeding from the nostril to call him a bleeder. It is not uncommon if a horse runs poorly, stops during a race, to then have the horse scoped. So we don't just have the practicing vet come by and tell the regulatory vet, hey, he's a bleeder, I saw it in the scope. That's not good enough. But to make an appointment, get the regulatory vet, get the practicing vet, scope the horse, look in there. But if the horse is bleeding down here, let's go ahead and call him a bleeder and do what we need to do, and let's not wait until the poor thing has to, bleed externally.
Commissioner, might I suggest a 5-minute to 10-minute break?
Absolutely. Okay, it is 5:14 right now. How about we reconvene at 25 after the hour?
Sounds great. Thank you.
In place of item 302-200A2 for the commission to issue those training facility licenses, much like they do the racetrack licenses. You'll note as you go through 302-200 and the other rules in Division 1, if it was an old rule, I cited the old rule that it came from in a certain section. For instance, 302-200D is the commission member may not act in the name of the commission on any matter without approval of the majority. That comes from the old rule 30315. That's just a reference for everyone as to where that may be. Also, at the end of this draft working document are some old rules that were part and parcel of 303 that will no longer appear in the new section. And that's just for your reference as you go through it. 302-201 is the commission meeting procedures. There was part of an internal discussion within the agency that we look and relook at the updated Robert's Rules of Order, or Robert's Rules of Order, yes, and whether some of these additional items might still be in the updated Robert's Rules of Order. So I'll be doing a little more staff work on that. But we did remove this quorum on D, C, and F as part of the internal agency review. Again, probably because it's within the Robert's Rules of Orders and needs not be recited outside of item B in that proposed rule. Let's see, the next one is going to be Division 2. So if anybody has any comments on meeting procedures or the commission duties at this point on Division 1, I'm happy to open the floor. And if not, I'll continue with Division 2.
Yeah. Anyone want to comment? Okay.
So we'll move on with Division 2 of Commission Responsibilities under 302 proposed. That is entitled Race Days and Oversight. This deals primarily with the Commission's responsibility to allocate those race days we're all so familiar with. There were some suggestions within the rule, specifically item H, or at that time I, if circumstances beyond the control of the association prevent the association from conducting a performance, the commission may award a makeup performance. But you'll notice that's a little bit redundant because the executive director can also issue those makeup performances. So as opposed to there being any confusion whether a racetrack association has a cancellation for weather and wants a makeup, whether that would need to be an item that's on the commission agenda, or whether they could contact the executive director within the agency for approval on a makeup day, we left that with the executive director for now, just given the fact that commission meetings occur every other month typically out of a year. So we want to be not the rock in the stream on those things. And that generally takes care of that. We also, through the internal agency review, decided to move the charity race days up into the actual allocation of race days above. So you'll notice that the Rule 302-251 has recently been scratched through, and it's been added just directly above that as item, it's J, beginning J, in 302, what is that, 251? Yeah, 250. So we moved that up into the allocation because that can be considered by the commission all at one time. As well, the allocation of live race dates for Class 1 tracks was recommended at the internal agency review that we move subsection A to 302-250G, so it's all included under the allocation of race days, and B has basically been removed. There were several suggestions on this because it says that the commission shall allocate to each such racetrack at least 17 consecutive weeks of live thoroughbred and at least 17 consecutive weeks of live quarter horse. That really wasn't as feasible when a lot of these requests for race dates were coming down, and so we didn't want to limit or make it overly broad, and we simply removed that section. There's the oversight of use of funds generated from parimutuel wagering. The commission will still maintain oversight of those overuse funds, or use of funds generated. The seal as well is carried over from the old Rule 303-13. That just defines the commission's seal that's used as part of its emblem. But if there are any questions on Division 2, I'm happy to take any public comment on commission responsibilities.
Anyone comment? Okay, go ahead.
Okay. Division 3 is the last one so far on commission responsibilities specific, and this is the obligation of the commission to conduct rulemaking. And rulemaking is specifically within the purview of the commission. These rules were maintained and carried over. Slight revisions were made and updated to those, but generally the rules are the same as carried over from 303, and portions were carried over from 307 under the contested provisions or the contested proceedings, and 307 is our current contested proceedings, and that involves negotiated rulemaking, but we combined all rulemaking for the commission under one section here. And if there's any public comment with regard to the rulemaking responsibilities of the commission, we're happy to open the floor.
Anyone like to comment? Okay. No? Go ahead.
Okay, thank you. So, thank you, Madam Chair. We're going to move on to the last subchapter that's on the agenda today on 3A. This is D, subchapter D, the executive director's responsibilities, the agency's responsibilities, and the comptroller's responsibilities. And this, again, is to help delineate what the commission does, what the executive director does, what the agency does as a whole, and then what the comptroller's responsibilities are relative to the commission's activities or the agencies. So under subsection D, or subchapter D, there are basically just two divisions, and the first division is the commission's organization with regard to the executive director and the agency responsibilities. So you'll notice with the draft 302.301, this is the commission's organization. It defines that the commission employs the executive director, and thereafter it says that the executive director has the primary responsibility to manage the operations and administration of the agency. Now, we may add further meat to this bone as it goes down the line. For instance, what are the primary qualifications of a steward? What are the primary qualifications of a racing official? This gives the executive director the understanding, and anybody that wants to qualify for a particular position, the understanding of what those qualifications would be by rule. So again, as we revise the whole set of rules and go into other rules, and hidden in there may be a responsibility of the executive director, some of that information may move over. Like it did with the negotiated rulemaking, where we took that from chapter 307 and brought that into this. We'll be moving things out of 303 and putting it into other chapters. As the chair recommended, or recognized today anyway, we'll have the Texas accredited bred, the horse industry escrow accounts. Well, all that information that's contained at the end of chapter 303 now, we'll move into a new chapter on wagering and trust administration that will be chapter 310. And so we're hoping within the next 6 months that those chapters will be coming out that will delineate and compact it all within one chapter. So if anybody has a question as they go along on the rules of racing, they'll understand, hey, I have a question about the horse industry escrow account, then I can go and look in one specific chapter and find that, as well as any other types of issues that are relative to the trust administrations. If there are any questions, at least on the first portion of Division 1 for the executive director, there are really only two rules, maybe 3 or 4. We've got subpoenas. We've got access to various commission programs. That gives access and no obstacles in affording their being available or accessing commission programs. And then the imposing of sanctions and penalties are clarified in 302.302. But again, this separates what the commission can sanction for and what the executive director sanctions for. Currently, under the Racing Act, there is a minimum steward's fine of $25,000, and the executive director can impose a penalty up to $100,000. You want to comment on what your vision is there?
So I think it's, if accepted by the legislature, it would be appropriate to raise the steward's level of penalty and not have a scheme where the stewards make a judgment call and the executive director, who is not at the race, is not in the position to judge what happened, and was not there at the time that that judgment was made, to override that judgment from a distance and raise the penalty. That seems inappropriate to me. So what I've told the stewards is, while I'm in this position and I'm going to make a case for that statutory change, the steward should have the ultimate authority to levy penalties for a violation of the rules of racing. And then there's an appellate process that goes to the commission and then up. I see it as a conflict of interest for the executive director to get involved in penalty violations in the appellate process, while also trying to be the one that is the sort of independent arbiter of how the agency administers rules for the commission. So I see that as a conflict of interest. So we're looking to make a statutory change there and empower the stewards to make that call. And then of course folks can appeal, at a steward's hearing to the State Office of Administrative Hearings, to the commission and so forth, up to courts. But the executive director comes out of that process as a concern I have, as a conflict of interest there.
And as she recognizes the conflict of interest, we hope that this is more of a balance of the due process scheme. The State Office of Administrative Hearings can review a steward's hearing, and if you've looked at the policies and procedures that our executive directors posted on the website, The penalty guidelines allow for a steward to look at aggravating and mitigating circumstances within any sort of violation, for instance, with a prohibited substance. In looking at those mitigating and aggravating circumstances, that too can be allowed by a SOA judge. So those kinds of situations allow for a SOA judge to increase that penalty or decrease that penalty based on what factors they may find. Although right now, at least as far as prohibited substances go, that's a substantial evidence review, and it would be made from the record itself that's submitted.
And just part of the background is we've realized that at times at some tracks, the stewards were not necessarily being treated as the ones who were ultimately responsible, that we had sub-factions that were working somewhat independently of the stewards. And so we've put it back that how things go at the racetrack and ultimately all the functions that are going on underneath it, those stewards need to be at the top so they can make the reasoned decision on what to do. And so we're working very hard to empower our stewards and have some consistency and not undercut their decision.
And that noise is it's raining suddenly, ladies and gentlemen, here in the beautiful city of Fredericksburg. And we need the rain.
And the cows will be happy.
Yes, they will.
Yes. Okay.
But again, it's to put that responsibility where the responsibility lies. The stewards are the judges. They're the ones that are on the track and understand those operations. And so this is something that we're looking at, of course, that would require statutory change of the Racing Act.
Does anybody want to comment on any of this? We welcome your input as we're going along trying to make things better.
So this may not relate to this specifically, however, we have received a question on the Facebook live stream, so she posed it to Commissioner McNabb.
Please.
This is a Jennifer, and I apologize if I mispronounced the last name, Worms. She says, Commissioner McNabb, questions on breeding. Bred, if a mare's previous foals can become Texas qualified if she is bred back to a Texas stallion, is there no requirement to confirm the pregnancy or even intent for pregnancy? Is this an opportunity for fraud, especially in quarter horses who allow artificial insemination? And then it goes on, most breeding farms make you confirm pregnancy to honor the stallion contract. When registering these horses, a DNA test is required to register that foal. The stallion contracts even go as far as if you split semen and you get two foals out of that one breeding, you have to pay another stallion fee. Okay. I don't see how one could fraud in the Texas Quarter Horse Association, for example. Stallions are TQHA or Texas accredited, and those associations keep stallion lists on who is where, same time for the mare lists.
Okay. I mean, as long as the breeds are satisfied that this is being conducted and that they have sufficient controls, then our role as a regulator, I don't want to mess up what they're doing well. So,
but I do think that it'd be
appreciate it.
recommended, any sort of definition that they'd like to submit for consideration is always something that they're able to do.
Thank you. Jennifer, if you're watching Facebook Live, thank you for your comment. If you go to the Texas Rules of Racing link on our website and submit your text as a comment, that would really be helpful so we can make sure we include that when we're looking at definitions. We appreciate it.
And speaking of public comments, for those that can access the materials online and for everybody here today that got a packet, so far all the public comments that we've received, even some of Commissioner McNabb's, are attached at the end of this packet that you have. So we've been trying, and we'll try throughout the process to update with all of the public comments. You may not see these comments come up in the next future meeting. We'll just add the new ones as they come in, as opposed to it just getting grander and grander and being redundant on public comments.
So when we have a public meeting, we'll take, just to reiterate, all of the mailed in comments through the public page when you email in, and we'll make a PDF of that, and that'll be included in meeting materials. So anybody that would like to look at any comments that we received can see it in one place in our meeting materials.
And those comments as well are coming from our internal agency staff as well. So everybody can kind of get an idea to any suggestions or even improvements on suggestions. It's always helpful.
Yeah.
Comments from the floor? Okay, go ahead.
Okay, well then our last section under the executive director and agency are going to be the comptroller, right of entry, records and rules. And this is Division 2 of Subchapter D. And this just takes from the Act. If you look at the Act, I cited those sections under the Raising Act as well as the old rules where this was done. Now, these may still be subject to some revision. I want to work with the Comptroller's Office with regard to some of the old rules on daily reporting by the racetracks. There's been a rule that's been out there, I think, since the beginning of racing. That's
Since the beginning of
daily
time,
reporting.
that the tracks are required to do daily pari-mutuel reports, but it's a Texas Comptroller rule, it's not a Texas Racing Commission rule. So we may have to show up at their commission meeting
Well, we're
and
going to
propose a
public
rule
comment.
change, because the commission gets daily reports from you, but we were thinking like weekly would be okay maybe, because that's just a Texas Comptroller rule that we're bound to follow unless we can encourage them to change it.
And means of reporting. Again, I don't know that, certainly racetracks aren't live every day or even simulcasting every day. And so it ends up being somewhat of a piecemeal situation even so. And if you do it weekly, say on Monday morning a report, I think it would be just as beneficial if you outline those specific days of those specific handle numbers. But again, the comptroller does have a right to enter onto the racetracks to review books and records, and that's recited here for purposes of looking at the financial data. And so those rules have to be outlined. We thought that this was the best spot, again, delineating the commission responsibilities, executive director, and the agency. We do have some comptroller responsibilities for purposes of obtaining and verifying and auditing financial information. So that's there. And we're going to open up the floor for a final time on comptroller and subchapter D, Division 2.
I want to acknowledge Virginia's work on the draft rules, because this is hard to take a whole bunch of rule sets, look at the statute, look at all of that, and try to craft a draft with all the input. So she did a really great job, and she specifically went into some real deep, some depth really here on procurement contracts. It's an area of concern, I think, that the Sunset Commission had for the agency. It's something that we want to protect the agency and the stakeholders from in the future, is the way we do contracting, and that's very transparent and done in accordance with state law, just like we're trying to do everything else. So thank you, Virginia, for all the great work you've done on the rules. Thank you to Sally and the Gillespie group for hosting the meeting, and thank you, Commissioner McNabb, for coming and sharing. Really appreciate that.
Happy to do it. Okay. So the next opportunity for public comment is the Texas Racing Commission meeting scheduled for Wednesday, October 12th?
Yes.
Oh, I'm sorry. That's the real commission.
That's the real, this is just a rules committee meeting.
Okay. This is
She'll be
Chairman
doing
Pate's
a
meeting.
report
Yeah.
at the
Okay.
commission meeting.
In
at the
Austin.
rules meeting.
Details will be published on our agency website prior to the meeting. We will also have another public meeting on rules review to be scheduled on Wednesday, November 9th, 2022 at Lone Star Park from 10 a.m. to 2 p.m. at the Breeders' Cup Suite. Thank you for attending today's meeting. The time is now 5:48 on the 13th of September. With all business concluded, we are now adjourned. Thank you very much.
everybody.
Appreciate it.